Hey everybody, this is me, the Undead Viking, and this is another episode of Tales from Behind the DM's Screen. These are basically opinions, stories, ideas, or whatever that are coming from running Dungeons & Dragons for 4 decades. I've been playing it for quite a long time, so I hope you're enjoying these. But today what I want to do is I want to talk about I always worry when I say things like this because people are going to think like I got my OSR shirt on, you know, just to like kind of rep or whatever. You know, I want to start off by saying I don't think there's any particular type or version of Dungeons and Dragons that is bad. I don't think that if you really enjoy playing Pathfinder 2nd edition that you're playing the game wrong. If you really loved like 3.5 and you still play that's great. You know, if you play 4th edition, you know, I don't want to ask you why, but if you really enjoy it, then great. You know, play that game at your table and enjoy the heck out of it. You know, I am a person that is firmly ensconced in the OSR revival. I really enjoy that version of D&D. I actually think 5th edition D&D is quite good. But there are things about like 3rd edition D&D and moving forward, and even for that matter 2nd edition D&D, that never really sat well with me. And while I did play each edition of Dungeons & Dragons, including Pathfinder, including some Hackmaster and some other things out there, you know, I still feel myself just going back to the original D&D that I played with, or basically the version of it that my friends and I have created, and even that, you know, we have our own, and one day I'll do a video about that. I'll do a video about like our own version of the rules of D&D that we've created, that we homebrewed up, and I still have problems with that too. So maybe there isn't a perfect system out there. I don't know. Maybe it would take too long for me to write, but just. That being said, quite a long intro for me to get to the point here, but play the D&D that you like. Play the RPGs that you like. Don't worry about what some old, you know, aging hippie behind the DM screen tells you is what he thinks is the best way to play. So anyway, what I'm going to get to here is skill checks and why I just inherently hate them. So if you go back to like old D&D, like skill checks just didn't exist, right? Like the only class that had skill checks were thieves. And thieves had like the thieves skills that were based off of a percentile roll that you would check. There were some things that you roll, like if strength checks would give you a chance to bend bars and lift gates, things like that. So I mean, other stats did have effects, but you know, as far as like skills per se, like the thieves were the only ones that had those, and skills themselves weren't really something that, like, if somebody said, oh, you know, I want to, you know, try to like use my persuasion on that guard to see if I can get in, there wasn't a persuasion skill. If they wanted to, like, you know, try to rough up the bandit captive so he would give up the password to the gate or something like that, there wasn't an intimidation, right? I mean, so what it was is that players would have to just kind of think on their feet, and they would have to, like, you basically role play out the situation. Now, I mean, this is like tired news here. I'm sure many of you have watched these videos before. But here is, I think, intrinsically one of the things that I think just makes like skills just make lazy players, as per the name of this video. So let me kind of back up a little bit more and tell you 2 stories about preceding D&D. So one of the things that I can remember, I was starting up. I was a senior in high school, and it was one of those things where I kind of came to the realization that we hadn't played D&D as a group in a long time. And it was like, we just all graduated from high school, and I was like, let's play some D&D this summer. I was like super excited to do it, and I wanted to put together a group and play. And so we got out, and I think we were on 2nd edition D&D at that point. And we got it out, and I had a player, a friend of mine named Justin, still good friends. He said he was like, I want to make a gnome, but I don't want to have to be an illusionist. Can I be a gnome wizard? And I said, that's fine. You can make a gnome wizard or whatever. And so he named his gnome wizard Yamato. And then he also said, could I please, as my gnome wizard, could I have the secondary skill of jeweler? Now, if you have a 2nd edition book somewhere, maybe I'll try to find a screenshot or something. I probably won't be. That just smacks of effort. I probably won't find that. But I mean, there was this list of secondary skills, right? And I remember I had read a few modules in the AD&D world where they referenced a few secondary skills. There was even one, I can't remember what it was, but it was one of those things where it was like, oh, you found these skeletons, and if you wanted to try to determine what type of skeletons they were, I think they said if your secondary skill is anthropology or something like that, you can tell, oh, it is a female cleric and a male half orc or something like that. It was one of the most ridiculous things just to add into a module, in my opinion. But if you go back in the day, things were so scatterdash back then. It was kind of crazy. But anyway, regardless, I remember he said, I just want to be a jeweler, and I was like, cool. Fine, whatever. It adds to your character. It makes it cool. And the thing is that he wanted to be a jeweler because he wanted to be able to appraise the gems and the jewels that the characters found as they're going about. And then he also wanted to apply that skill where he could, if he wanted to, he could take a rough stone and he could create something with it. And he had this idea of, being able to create magical amulets and things like that, and finding special precious stones and things like that. And all told, I was like, fine, cool, awesome, that's a cool idea, and it gives your character some background. And normally we would roll on that thing and and occasionally those secondary skills, basically what did you do before you became an adventurer, kind of this was a D percentage roll, and it's oh, I'm a sailor. So sometimes those things would come in handy, and most often they just didn't, right? It was just a little bit of flavor that maybe at some point somewhere down the line you would say, you would be presented with some sort of situation, and then you would look at your secondary skills wait a minute, it says here I was a cooper. It's I know how to make that barrel. I can fix it, and you're oh, okay, cool. It came in handy finally, right? Ever. But it didn't, it was just fluff. It just maybe gave yourself a little bit more of a dimension, and it didn't really matter much. And that was fine, right? I mean, it wasn't a skill that really directly affected the game in any really meaningful way. I mean, and I just, in the case of my friend who wanted to make the gnome wizard jeweler, it was just kind of a cool little tidbit about him as well that I think really added a lot to that character. So that's a skill that didn't really bother me at all. Now, also, back when I played basic Dungeons and Dragons, if you remember the old B5, the basic D&D module, one of my favorite modules of all time. A lot of people say, oh, B4 is the Lost City is probably my favorite basic adventure ever. I mean, I think I got them all up into 9, and then I just I just never either found them or bought them. But B5 was the Horror on the Hill, and I remember I just loved the image of and I if I can find that, I can probably find the screenshot of that. But I mean, I love this image, and I think it was 2 ogres or something yelling at these people that were rowing away from this island. And the whole idea behind this is that there's basically this island, and it's very secluded, and the player characters, there's a town relatively close by, and there's been the strange goings on the island, and you're being told, oh, go check out and see what you can find out over there. And so the players will like go to this, and there's a dungeon. You keep going down, and there's lots of big baddies and stuff. And I don't want to like, I mean, it's a module that's like decades old, so I mean, I'm not really into spoiler territory here. But I'll just say this, for DMs that are looking for really good source material, it is actually a really, really good kind of one of those encapsulated areas of intrigue that you could plop down into your campaign world really, really easily. And it had some fantastic maps and some cool creatures, both on the overland of the island, and also once you start digging in and getting into the caverns and things below. A lot of cool stuff there too. That being said, the whole reason I'm mentioning this, and this is like from memory, and this is like the first time I ever remember reading anything. So I could be misremembering this, but once you got down to a certain level of the dungeon, like you like, there was like levels that were like really, really well dug out and carved. But once you got down to like the lowest level of the dungeon, there was basically like there were these kobolds, and and they were living down there, and there was like some like lava pits and things like that. And there was a moment where there was this crevasse where like if the players wanted to cross this crevasse, there were like some natural stone bridges that would cross, and then like, of course, then hundreds of feet below, the lava flowed or whatever. And if you were crossing the crevasse and you got hit in combat, there was a chance you would fall to your doom. And what it would be, and the rules just stated, have the characters roll a d20 and roll underneath their dexterity. And if they roll underneath their dexterity, they're fine. If they roll above it, they fall off and they die. And they actually gave, like, kobolds will actually go out there, and kobolds were rather dexterous, like they had a 13 or a 14, so they would chance it, right? And so, like, some of your, like, Joe plate mail dumber fighters, that didn't have really good dexterity, like, that it could be their undoing. And I remember, like, that was, like, the first time I had ever read that. There probably was a rule somewhere in the rule book that said you could do ability score checks. But that was the first time I'd ever seen or read anything like that at all. So here's the crazy thing was, like, I took that moment, and every single time after that, when I would have a situation with the players where we would have to decide what happens or what they do, I would use that ability. I would say, okay, you want to be able to, shouldn't I know, like, what the schedule of the church is for the sermons or something like that? Okay, roll a d20, get underneath your wisdom. If you get that, yeah, fine, that kind of thing, right? And I was like, it was a really good catch-all. And we just kind of incorporated that into the way we played. And that in a way was a skill check, pretty much. If you happen to be very wise, then like certain things would like judging the weather would give you that sort of insight, or and like if you needed to be able to, like, not just bend bars or lift gates, but maybe like you had to be able to throw a rock a certain amount of distance. Okay, roll underneath your strength, and then you can get it to that point. That sort of thing. You could do those kind of tests and what have you, and I enjoyed that. But what I didn't realize is I was actually laying the groundwork towards turning my players into lazy people. Now, I have fought, like, literally, like, hard arguments, not during game, right, but hard arguments with the players in my gaming group about how much I despise things like knowledge checks. I despise things that are like, sleight of hand, or I mean like appraisal or intimidation, or any kind of, like, I just don't like those checks. I just think it's one of those things where, like, you are taking the creativity away from the players, and you're just saying basically roll a 20-sided die and we'll see how well. It's just basically a flip of, like, not like statistically it isn't flip of a coin type of thing, but it is just like, here, just we're gonna just decide what could be a very interesting like situation or a very interesting decision or a very interesting role playable moment in the game, and we're just gonna dumb it down into a 20-sided die. And it's something that like I have strived or strove to basically, if I think the player can do what they're trying to do, then I give it to them. If like if in a character's backstory they said, it's like, oh well, before I was a cleric, I spent a lot of time in the woods and I studied animals and things like that. So would I know, like, what are the feeding habits of a brown bear? Fine. You know what they are, those sorts of things. If you have a wizard that is, like an academician, then you could tell me like, oh, would he understand the like what the like the basics of the astral plane? Yeah, sure. You happen to pick up a book and you read about that. You would know that. Why not have a situation where, like, then I can say, oh yes, you totally remember you attended a lecture with like the archwizard Nicodemus was there, and you asked him a question about traveling different planes, and he spent the half hour discussing the intricacies of moving about the astral plane, and this, that, and the other thing, and you totally remember that, and so that's like a wonderful like role playing type moment. The same thing goes for like finding secret doors and things like that. Like when I put a secret door into a room, I don't just say, okay, it's a secret door. I actually think about the fact that, like, how is that door secret? How is it special? Like, is it like there is a plate that moves out of the way, and then like you can slide the stone back into the stone? Is it something where it's like it is a seamless door, but if you just put a little bit of pressure on it, it'll open? Things like that. And same thing with traps too, for that matter. Like if I think that like if the players can just tell me things that are like, saying, okay, I want to like go up to the statue, I'm not going to touch it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get down on my hands and knees, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look, and I'm going to like study all around the statue, and I'm going to look to see if I can tell that there's any grime or dust that like maybe has moved an inch in either way. Like this is something that gets adjusted if somebody messes with it, things like that. And if I come up with this like thing where yes, indeed, the statue does move, or it twists, or something like that, then yes, I mean, I'm not going to have somebody like, oh yeah, now do a perception check and find out whether or not you see that. No, you were smart. You thought of something. You took the time to describe what your character's going to do. One of my players, Brad, who's been in my group forever, he's very, very, he thinks like that. He doesn't just go directly for the 20-sided die. He doesn't say, can I make a perception check? He doesn't say that. He's like, I'm going to climb up on top of that tree, and I'm going to see if I can see like any smoke or anything like that. I'm going to like, and he's one of those people that like, he wants to like live and breathe the character he's in. And I appreciate that about him a great deal. I just wish I could get more of my players to be like that. The thing with the secret doors, as I was talking about, is somebody says, I'm going to go up to the wall, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if like any of the flagstones of the wall, like if they move or anything like that. I'm going to like, and if that's how the secret door opens, yeah, sure, fine, you found it. I'm not going to have you roll a search check or whatever to determine whether or not that is something that you found. And I think what it is that we are so used to driving the story forward, and we're so like get to the next combat, get to the next combat, get to the next combat. And yes, Dungeons and Dragons games have combat, and combat is a very like intense, emotional, like a moment of moving things around and making rolls and seeing how much damage you do and describing the combat, and those are important. Those are important moments. But what we end up doing is that we get so used to whether or not a 20-sided die roll comes up to be factor the number X, and that determines whether or not I'm able to persuade the guard at the temple to go for a walk with me, so and discuss whatever the horse racing games that are happening the next day, because I've taken the time to research that person and follow him and know he's a gambler. These are things that can add a lot of life to the game, while the other members of the party break into the temple and steal the golden idol that we need to return to that wizard Nicodemus that we've been dealing with for last time. Those are things that really, really add a lot to the world that you're playing in and the game. And like I said, instead of having players who are just kind of sitting there and looking at their phone, or having conversations about the last movie they saw, or what they think the best Star Trek episode is, or whatever, all good conversations. And yes, sitting down and playing D&D is about enjoying the company of your friends and enjoying the company of these people that you're taking the time to spend the time with. But it is also about the game that you're playing. And so if you actually strive to get the players to actually live as their characters and describe their actions and be clever with their characters and take the extra time, instead of just saying, I'm going to roll intimidation, do I get it out of them, and then you will help the people at the table kind of grow into the story, become better members of the story, and also you will be rewarded as the dungeon master as well, because you're going to see that attentiveness. And this is something I'm going to probably do a video of, how to be a good player for your dungeon master. And and I don't, I consider myself a pretty damn good dungeon master. I do a good job, and I've definitely been shittier and been a pretty poor dungeon master in the past, in a lot of ways. But in 40 plus years of doing this, I've definitely learned the hard way, and learned the smart way in some cases too. But I've definitely learned how to do what I do in a way that and to perfect it. And I'm not perfection by any means, but I've definitely paid my dues or whatever. And I don't say with some sort of weird I'm better than lots of people out there. I just say that I've done it for so long. I've learned what not to do. Not that I didn't get it to start with anyway. But my point is that I feel that if you give your players the ability to be excellent players and not just be a player that rolls a die, everybody at the table is going to have a lot of fun, and they're going to appreciate the story. They're going to appreciate the parts that they're playing in that story. They're going to feel that their character is more than just the numbers on that sheet. And you, as the Dungeon Master, you're going to feel like your story, your world, your creation is being appreciated as well. And that is integral to your enjoyment of the game that you're running. So anyway, there you go. That is why I think skill checks are making lazy players. If you disagree, you agree, I'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and make those comments. I'll try to respond to each and every one as you do that. If you have situations where, like which rule system you like the best, or which skill system you like the best, I'd love to hear about that as well. And if there's like a type of these videos that you'd like me to do, I'd love to hear those suggestions. Go ahead and I'll put those in the docket. I've been writing down tons of these, and I've come up with a few. But I'd love to hear what you'd like to hear. So there you go. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. As always, yeah, I just appreciate it so much. If you haven't done so already, hitting the subscribe button wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But do it or don't do it. Doesn't matter to me. Yeah, just be awesome, be cool, and yeah, stay tuned for more of these. All right, bye-bye.